everyone. It is Monday night, and tonight I am delighted to introduce you to my friend Nicole Deese, whose brand new book, All That It Takes, releases tomorrow. So I'm honored that she decided to share part of her release time with us. And this is your opportunity to learn more about Nicole and her contemporary romance that has wonderful women's fiction types of threads as well. And you get your money's worth with her books. Look at all these pages. So Nicole, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, hello everyone, and thank you so much for having me. This is such a treat, and it's a privilege to share this launch with you, Kara, so thank you so much. Yeah, it's All That It Takes comes out tomorrow, and it's been kind of a big push all year to get this. You know how that feels like when you work on a project for what feels like forever, and then birthday day comes, you know. So this is it's a real treat to have it upon us. But yeah, so I'm Nicole Deese, and yeah, I write like you said, inspirational contemporary romance and with women's fiction threads. That's exactly what
awesome. So first off, tell us, which book is this for you?
I just counted with my kids the other day. I think this is 14. I think this is 14.
Gosh. Yeah. That's amazing. I don't think I realized you had that many books out. And one of the things we don't talk about in publishing is getting your first contract is a big deal, but getting that second, third, and fourth contracts are equally exciting and almost more so. So congratulations, book 14. So how did you come up with the idea for All That It Takes?
So All That It Takes, I have it right here so I keep looking down. I'm like, All That It Takes, I'm talking on the desk. All That It Takes is kind of a spin-off a little bit. It has some connecting characters and kind of a connecting world as All That Really Matters, which is the book that came out previous to this. I should have had it on my desk. It's all pink as opposed to this being all blue. And so this is actually the two secondary characters that are the brother of my main character in All That Really Matters is Miles, who is my hero in this book, and then Molly, who is my heroine in All That Really Matters, is Val, is her assistant. So they're kind of two secondary characters that get their time in the spotlight in this book. So
I love that. And I know I've had it happen, and clearly you had it happen with this book, where you're writing one book and all of a sudden some characters kind of start waving their hands and going, hey, I've got a story to tell too. And I think as readers, sometimes we can be like, say what? I'm not quite sure how that works, but it really does. And so how did you know that they were going to have their own book? At what point as you were writing the prior one did you go, oh yeah, they're going to definitely have a story? Or was it someone else who helped you see that?
So it actually was someone else. I write pretty closely with Connellan Cassette and Tammy Gray. We have kind of formed a little, critique alliance. And so I was writing one day, I always knew that Miles McKenzie was going to be the hero in this book, just because I'd set the series up to where Molly, who is my heroine in All That Really Matters, Miles is her twin brother. So I knew that it was going to be a sister-brother deal, but I was really kind of thinking way outside the box for who was going to be, who was he going to match to? And I was about 3/4 of the way into All That It Takes. And one day Connie was critiquing something I had written, and she's like, you should have Val be the heroine. And I was like, I should have Val be the heroine. So it was so funny, like how everything kind of started to align. And then of course I kind of had to go back and really make sure that I wasn't writing myself into a corner, as we also do, right?
Absolutely.
Been there before several times. So kind of had to make sure, that a secondary story could really work with her. And it did.
Yeah, well, and what's been fun is I have not read the other book yet, although it's sitting on my Kindle. So I can't wait to dig into it. But diving into this one, you've done what I love most, where it feels like a standalone, yet I can tell if I'd read the prior book, I'd be like, oh, it's so fun to get to see, these characters again and kind of build on it. but I'm not lost at all. I mean, as an author, I can go, oh, okay, I've pretty quickly figured out what probably happened in book one, but I'm not lost. Instead, I'm intrigued. And so was that easy to do, or did you have to, was that planned, or did it just kind of happen that way?
So I did have to, you just kind of create those connected dots. As you said, it's kind of like, what are the dots that I need to have for this story to make sense, and really to build that intrigue factor, into the first book. One thing that was funny though is Molly, who again is heroine of All That Really Matters, is very extroverted and is kind of this, outgoing, very right there on page, kind of personality. And Val, as you know, is more mild, definitely more introverted and just kind of a quieter disposition. And so I really had to right away, I knew that I could not have Molly in a whole lot of scenes because she just takes over. And so I kind of knew like, I'm going to have to create a place for Molly to be while Val gets to set the stage for her own story. And so she does, obviously Molly pops in many times, but I knew kind of right away, like Val really needed this space for to be introduced properly, to the readers and to really kind of create and take her own stage. And really that's what so much of her story is about anyways. It's really about being vulnerable enough to tell her story and to recognize that she has a story to tell. So,
and I love that, because I think there are so many people, I know there have been times in my life where I've been like, I don't really have a story. I don't have anything worth sharing with people. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the, I guess, themes or tricks that the enemy likes to do is kind of like take away our testimony and our story, because if it's not big and dramatic, then it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And so I love that you're tackling that in this book, because it's something that many of us have related to. But you've also got this theme going on about all that it takes is one person. So where did that come from? Where did that kind of bubble up as, oh, that's what's going to be going on in this book?
It actually was a little while in to the story. And I've been a part of just, being a part of our local church and several different ministries. My husband and I have worked in ministry. My parents were in ministry. And so I've been a part of all kinds of different small groups and things like that. And just being able to sit in a group dynamic so many times and listen to people's stories, you really get a feel for what a blessing community is. And I really feel like of everything that I will hopefully ever write and everything I have written, there is some community oriented connection. I really feel like God does his biggest work, through the hands and feet of others. And so, so there's a really pivotal scene. I don't want to spoil it, but there's a pivotal scene in this book, just about the halfway mark, where Val is in a situation where she kind of is observing a group of women share about how it took one person to kind of bring them out of a difficult season, a hard place, some moment where just one person being that link in community really launched them to a whole nother place in life, whether it be in their healing journey or whether it be a connection with God, or whether it be really like a physical, tangible, felt need that's being met, and so that's really kind of this exploration throughout Val's journey, and really her recognizing like that she gets to also be that one for somebody else. So
that's awesome. And I think that there's this really deep hunger for connection that the last couple of years have reminded us, or taken people who are introverts and they're like, I'm fine by myself. And then we've realized, okay, I'm fine by myself, but I still need other people. Or extroverts like me. I mean, that's why I started Book Talk, because I'm like, I need people. Yeah. And so that idea that, there have been so many people who've been on their own for the last year, 2 years, or maybe their whole lifetime. And I feel like this book is one of those that kind of throws that lifeline of, hey, it doesn't have to be that way. You can still be private. You can still be quiet, introverted, whatever word you want to use, but still have a story to share and still be worth other people approaching.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
So another thing that's going on in this book, and again, I mean, we are getting our money's worth because there's so much. I love it. I love it. There's so many books where I'm like, oh, it ends so fast. And this one, I'm just savoring because there's so much going on inside of it. But there's that idea of, and it comes up really fast with the hero, the idea that, you know, if you're not doing this for God, then you don't have value. You don't have worth. And again, it's another one of those tricks or lies that the enemy likes to apply to us, to say, well, you don't really believe, you're not really worth anything because you're not fill in the blank. Yeah. So did that come in part from, sometimes it's just the characters and that's where the themes come from, or is it something that also grew out of your personal experience?
A little of both. You know, like I said, I've kind of been in and out of different ministries for many years. Kind of seen the inside, you know, the insider's view as a pastor's daughter, and you know, worked in a church myself and in different ministries and things. But really, I was thinking a little bit earlier that growing up inside of kind of a more legalistic type of church, I remember very clearly being at summer camps, even when I was, you know, 5th and 6th and 7th grade, and it was like, okay, everyone pray, and at the end of this prayer, you're going to decide, like, are you going to be a missionary or an evangelist or a pastor? Like, those are the 3 things, you know. And I was like, oh man, like, that's how I have to serve God. Like, those are my 3 options. And so I think, even though I grew, you know, I obviously grew up and was still going to churches, that there was always this pull that was like, if I really had a heart to pursue God, like, I would fill one of those categories. And so even becoming a writer in my, you know, at 30, I really still felt that kind of, I don't know, pull, pressure, tension. And so as I was writing Miles, and because I've, you know, had, you know, been on staff and have, you know, most of my friends have either worked for a church or have been on staff at some point, you know, I just kind of tend to have those circles. I knew a lot of that struggle. And so for Miles, you know, one of his big struggles is just that he also has had almost this hierarchy, you know, of spiritual hierarchy. Like, these are the categories. Like, if I'm really going to serve God, you know, in the biggest way, in the boldest way, then it's got to fit into this. And really, you know, the cool thing I think about these 2 characters is that Val is the opposite of that. You know, she's and yet the way that she actually serves and loves, you know, really kind of out of this, you know, love your neighbor as yourself mindset, really is such a beautiful contrast to, you know, the big, the bold, the you know, this call that just seems, you know, let me just do the most extreme, you know, kind of call to serve God the best. And she's over here just, you know, loving well one person. And I think, gosh, like, there's just such beauty in that, where the Lord's like, hey, I have actually called you to the community that you're in. And I think we can forget that sometimes. And sometimes that always, actually, that starts at home first, right? That's those spheres that you work out. And so that's really, I try and just drill down, like, there is no hierarchy, you know, that God, wherever you are, God wants to use you, and whoever you're around, God wants you to be a light to. And so that's Absolutely. Really what I'm trying to break through in that barrier. It's just saying, hey, it's not always about these big extreme, you know, callings. Sometimes it's just, it's right here. It's what's God doing in your heart that you can be a blessing to others.
Well, and I think I very much remember being told, oh, well, you must not really love God if you're not going to be a missionary or a pastor's wife. And I'm like, yeah, no, I really know what God's calling me to, and that's not it. But I was stubborn as a 16-year-old. So I could kind of go, no, I hear what God's telling me. And for me, that looks like being a university professor and writing books. But I always say, but that's right now. Who knows in 5 years what it's going to look like? And I love that Miles is also dealing with the death of a dream, because I think everybody has experienced that. And those can be the hardest times to find God, and to just be like, okay, where are you? What's going on? Did I miss you? And all those questions. So I love that he's wrestling with things like that. So we've had a couple of questions come in. I asked if people have read your book, and some, including your dad, are like, well, yes, I've read them all. And others are like, yeah. I love that he was like, I'm her dad, I should have, which I like. I love that. That's awesome. But others are like, I haven't. So which one should I start with? And I think that's a great question for people who are listening and tuning in right now is, should they start with this one? Or is there another one that you're like, oh, that's a really great introduction to my writing?
Yeah, I mean, they could absolutely, like you said, this, all that it takes can absolutely be read as a standalone. If you want to read them a little bit more sequential, you could start with All That Really Matters first, which is Molly and Silas's story, and then move, like there's some connection there between the siblings and a couple of side characters. So you can move that way. Or I also have Before I Called You Mine, which is a book about that has some personal connection to our international adoption story with our daughter. So some people like to start there. So I don't know, it's yeah.
It's kind of like asking which one's your favorite child.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, my favorite child depends on, the week really, or maybe the hour. I don't know.
Yeah, some days like that.
A lot of opportunities.
Yeah. And for readers, it's always helpful for authors if you start with their current book, especially if it's just coming out, because that's how we get additional contracts. But then to go back and read the ones that you've missed is always a great idea. So another comment I just have to share with you. Someone's like, love the earrings. And they are awesome.
My friend Bobby Dietz makes like almost all my earrings, like 99% of my earrings she makes. So I always advertise her.
Yeah, that's awesome. You'll have to drop a link in the comments later. But a couple other people have asked, are your books in audio?
Yes, they are. Almost all of my books, I think that there's maybe a couple novellas or one novella that's not, but yeah, my Waterfall Press books and my Bethany House books are all on Audible, and All That It Takes will actually be on Audible tomorrow as well. And it's very fun because the last two books have had both this one and All That Really Matters have both a male and female narrators. That's really fun to kind of have that points of view.
Yeah, that's awesome, because that is not normally how they're done. Usually it's one narrator who does the whole book.
I know. I was just giddy when I was like, oh, there's two.
That's awesome. Now, even though I'm reading it, I'm going to have to listen to audio just because that intrigues me as well. And someone mentioned, and I think this is such a great point, that she loves that Miles is in the ministry and we get to see how he questions how he's supposed to be serving. Because I do think sometimes we'll put people in ministry on this pedestal that they, number one, probably don't want. And number two, it then makes it, like you said earlier, they're holier than thou. They've got a real calling. The rest of us don't. And so you're lowering that.
Yeah, he is very human. So he's very real. His struggles are very real. And I think you're right. That is exactly what we can do is we can think, oh, that's, a pastor doesn't struggle with that, or someone that's in full-time ministry doesn't struggle with that. And I think that's just, I know that that's wrong. And so, I really try to make Miles very relatable and, to those who have worked in the ministry and those who haven't, I think he's a believer, and a believer means that we struggle, right? So absolutely.
Yeah, that's such a great point. So another question, and then I'll get back to you because I want to talk about your adoption story a little, but someone asked, do you have any advice for newer aspiring writers? Like, what's that one piece of advice that you got or that you would give that you feel propels someone from starting out as writing to, okay, now you're starting to get traction?
Okay. I have one, this is probably my biggest one. And it's actually what I have to pep talk myself with, even 15 books in. But I love to start here because I think it's so important that I feel like in my early days and even now, in 15 books in, I still have this, temptation or this tendency to look up from my work and to focus on what other people are doing, right? Like, this thing's happening in this person's career, or, I'll even take it to hey, I'm on first draft writing, which does not look like final draft writing, like first draft writing is ugly writing. And so I think as creatives, we can, be really critical. I can be so critical of my own self. And so I feel like the Lord is always saying, keep your, keep your eyes on your own page, keep your eyes focused on what I have for you and stop. There's space, God will make room and he'll make space and he directs. And I can't tell you how many times that's happened in my career is just when I focus on what he's asked me to do, his next steps are so clear and obvious for me to take. So don't judge what you're doing now in first draft writing by someone else's final product, because those are never going to match, and then really the other part of that is keep, no one's going to tell the story the way that God's asking you to tell the story. And so just like I could not write your books, never, ever in a million years, I could not write, Connell Cassette's book. Like no one would ever want me to write biblical fiction. That is not my realm, I'm so glad it's hers, it's blessed me so much, but that's not my world. And so this is I've had to just go, this is my thing that God's asked me to do. This is where I'm called. And so keep my eyes, on my own page. So keep your eyes on your own work. And God will bless you for that. Like that competition and that critical spirit is not from him.
Absolutely. And that's great advice because it's so easy to do, no matter if you're just starting out or you've been at it for 35 or 36 books, just going around and going, why hasn't this happened? And so I can't tell you how many times God's told me the same thing. Keep your eyes on your page. Keep your eyes on your story.
It robs your joy.
It does. It does. Yeah. And even just being aware that, hey, this is a risk and it's a trap. And so or pulling yourself out of it as quickly as you can and going, okay, I'm starting to do that again. And that's not where I want to be. That's not how I'm going to find joy in this journey. So great advice on that. And someone else has said, you and your books are such a blessing to so many. And it's true. So one of the things I wanted to talk about though, is your book, Before I Called You Mine. I think most people know I'm an attorney, but I also teach full-time at a Big Ten university. So the only area of law that I still do is adoption law. So when you and your family were going through your adoption journey, you better believe I was watching. So what was that like? And then it became part of a book that you wrote. So sometimes as writers, we try and keep those very separate. Here's my life. Here's my books. And yet with Before I Called You Mine, it really came together. So how did that play out in your writing, in your thoughts? Kind of how did that all come together?
I'm trying to figure out a concise way to tell this because I am a novelist, so I'm trying to go, how do I summarize?
Yeah. Well, we already know you like words because your books are generous on the word side. So.
Yeah, I've got to put them on a diet. They're a little chubby. Let's be real. So really the boiled down version is that my writing career had just kind of come into some traditional contracts. Like it was really picking up speed, and the Lord had really called us to adopt. We had known that for a long time. There had been lots of starts and stops. And so, but it had kind of been off the table, and that's a whole nother story, but it had kind of been off the table for a couple of years. And then it came back by my husband, who was like, hey, let's talk about this. And I was like, let's not talk about this. Like we have moved on from this realm. And anyways, so through a lot of running like Jonah, which I was the Jonah, I really felt like when we were going to pursue international adoption, when we were going to pursue, we wouldn't even know Lucy's face at this point. We just knew kind of the agency we were going to go with. I felt like I was going to have to lay down writing. I knew what was involved in adoption. We had been in all the classes. We had lots of friends adopt. So I couldn't see a way forward in adoption that looked like me continuing to write full time and adopting a child. And so really it was this surrender, which a lot of my books have that theme because God's asked me to do a lot of that. And so it really had this surrender of that. And then, so I really did, this is crazy, but this is the God honest truth. The day we had submitted a request into Holt International, which was our adoption agency, to get more information on the little girl that had come to us via email. And that I had been waiting for 4 months to hear about a potential contract with my publisher at that time. The Monday morning that we got the file to look at Lucy's file, and all of her kind of medical history and her past and everything where she was in China. 1 hour later, I got a call from my agent who said that I was just offered a 2-book deal.
Oh, and that's amazing.
Yeah, which is really, it's a different choice in Before I Called You Mine, but it's a similar opportunity. I guess it's 2 good things, right? Because I think that God often works like, it's not really much of a choice when it's like, here's the great thing, and then here's this not great thing, like choose, it's like, no, here's 2 really good things that mean walking through one is kind of closing the door on the other. And so I remember telling my agent at the time, like, I have to turn that down. I think I just saw the face of my daughter. Like, those are literally the words out of my mouth. And she's like, okay, and so that pursuit happened. And then I really did lay writing down for almost a year. And then, but while we were in China, that the idea, I was watching all of these single women come in and asking them their stories, because, I was adopting with my husband, and of course we had 2 boys at home. So the story kind of started to churn itself inside me. And then I came home, and I had no contract because I wasn't, there was no real future. It was really just a story that I needed to tell. That I like. So on my off nights, or when I felt, inspired, I would just go and write a little bit, and then a bunch of really cool stuff happened, later. But really, I wrote that book with no contract, and not even sure if it would ever be something that would be published. Honestly, it was for me. Amazing. It was for me and the Lord.
That's amazing. And I love that, because we all have those seasons, and to be willing to lay down a dream for another dream is not easy. And so for God to then kind of say, okay, and here it's back, is just so sweet that he would do that.
Yeah. So and really for God to marry those 2 things. Like, here I was for, a year and a half, like, running from the idea of having to lay it down. And then the Lord's like, actually, I'm going to bring it back, and you're going to not only get to publish a book, but it's going to be about adoption. Like, it was just, I could never even plan that myself.
Yeah, that's amazing. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. And I love that All That It Takes is releasing tomorrow. Happy book release day, a little bit early. Thanks so much for joining us and letting us learn more about you and your books. And I wish you just the best when it comes to this, because it's a wonderful, wonderful story.
Thank you so much. You're wonderful.